The Galactic Council space station floated in the darkness of space like a massive jewel. Ships from hundreds of worlds docked at its many ports, bringing diplomats and representatives to the annual Summit of Unity. Inside the main hall, beings of every shape and size moved carefully around each other, speaking in hushed tones about trade agreements and peace treaties. But when Princess Hayri entered the grand reception hall, the whispers stopped. Then they started again, quieter and more nervous than before. She walked with perfect posture, her long, dark hair tied back in the traditional warrior's style of the Valkros Empire. Her ceremonial armor gleamed under the artificial lights, and the red markings on her face marked her as royalty and a proven warrior. 2 guards followed 3 steps behind her, their hands never far from their weapons. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship. Diplomats who had been laughing moments before suddenly found urgent reasons to examine their data pads. A group of traders from the merchant worlds actually took several steps backward, nearly tripping over each other in their hurry to make space. Ambassador Taiyang from the Drex Consortium was in the middle of telling a story when Hayri passed nearby. His voice died mid-sentence. He bowed low, his 3 eyes fixed firmly on the floor until she had moved on. Only then did he dare to breathe normally again. She killed 15 raiders single-handedly last year, someone whispered. I heard she challenged a general to single combat and won in under 2 minutes, another voice added. The Valkros Empire sent her here as a message. They want us all to remember their power. Hayri heard every word. Her hearing was far better than most species realized. She kept her face perfectly calm, showing nothing. This was her life. This had always been her life. Fear and respect mixed together until no one could tell the difference. No one saw Hayri. They only saw the fierce princess, the warrior of Valkros, the one you did not approach unless you had no other choice. She accepted a drink from a server who placed it on a table and backed away quickly without making eye contact. The beverage was some local specialty that tasted like metals and flowers. Hayri pretended to enjoy it while scanning the room with practiced ease. She was here to observe, to represent her people, and to remind the galaxy that the Valkros Empire was not to be trifled with. The reception continued around her, but never with her. She was an island in a sea of social interaction. After an hour of standing in the center of the hall being carefully avoided, Hayri moved toward the balcony. At least there she could look at the stars instead of watching people pretend she did not exist, while simultaneously watching her every move. The balcony was empty, of course. No one wanted to be trapped in a small space with her. She gripped the railing and allowed herself one moment of genuine feeling. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Her jaw unclenched. She stared out at the distant stars and wondered, not for the first time, what it would be like to be normal, to have someone approach her because they wanted to, not because they had to. You looked like you could use some company. Hayri spun around, her hand moving instinctively toward the blade at her hip. A human stood there holding 2 glasses of some amber liquid. He was young by human standards with dark hair and kind eyes. He wore the simple uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, with none of the medals or decorations that usually marked important people. He did not look afraid. That was the first surprise. Most beings showed fear in the tension of their bodies, the wideness of their eyes, the way they held their breath. This human showed none of that. I am Jiwan, he said, offering one of the glasses. I noticed you were alone out here. These are from Earth. We call it apple cider. Non-alcoholic, so it should be fine for diplomatic functions. It is sweet and reminds people of home. Inside the hall, the music had stopped. People were staring through the glass doors at the impossible scene. A human was approaching the fierce princess. A human was speaking to her casually. A human was apparently insane. Hayri studied him carefully. There was no challenge in his posture. No fear either. Just simple, honest friendliness. When was the last time someone had shown her that? She could not remember. You know who I am, she said. It was not a question. Princess Hayri of the Valkros Empire, Jiwan replied. Famous warrior, skilled commander, and according to every person in that hall, someone I should definitely not be talking to right now. And yet you are here. He smiled. My mother always said I was too curious for my own good. Besides, everyone deserves company if they want it. You looked like maybe you did. Hayri took the glass from his hand. Their fingers did not touch. She sipped it carefully, analyzing it for any sign of poison or drugs. There was nothing but sweetness and a strange, pleasant taste. "It is good," she admitted. "My grandmother's favorite," Ji-won said, moving to stand beside her at the railing. Not too close, but not maintaining the usual 5-meter distance everyone else kept. She said it tasted like autumn on Earth. They stood in silence for a moment. It should have been awkward, but somehow it was not. Hairi found herself relaxing slightly. "Just slightly. Why did you approach me?" she asked finally. "Truly," Ji-won thought about it, looking out at the stars. "Because you looked lonely. And because I have been to a lot of these diplomatic functions and I have noticed something. The most dangerous people in the room are rarely the ones everyone is afraid of. They are usually the ones everyone ignores." "That is a strange philosophy." "Humans have a lot of those," he said with another smile. "We are still new to galactic politics. We have not learned all the proper fears yet." Behind them, gasps rippled through the crowd. Several diplomats had their communication devices out, probably reporting this shocking development to their superiors. Ambassador Taeyang looked like he might faint. Hairi allowed herself the smallest smile. "Your people will hear about this. They may be unhappy with you." "Probably," Ji-won agreed. "But I think meeting you is worth a little unhappiness from my superiors. Do you want to talk about what it is like being the most feared person in the room? Or would you rather talk about something else entirely?" For the first time in years, Hairi laughed. It was a small sound, barely there, but it was real. "Something else entirely," she said. "Tell me about Earth's autumn." And as the human began to describe seasons and falling leaves and harvest festivals, Hairi realized that something had just changed. She did not know what yet, but she knew with absolute certainty that her life had just become far more complicated, and perhaps, she thought, far more interesting. The next morning, the entire station buzzed with gossip. The human diplomat Ji-won had spoken with Princess Hairi for nearly an hour on the balcony. Some said he must be incredibly brave. Others said he must be incredibly stupid. A few suggested he might be a spy using some strange human technique to get close to the Valkyros princess. Ji-won ignored all of it. He sat in the human delegation's small office reviewing reports about the summit's progress. Or trying to. His supervisor, Director Hyun-woo, kept pacing back and forth behind him. "Do you understand what you have done?" Hyun-woo asked for the third time. "The Valkyros Empire is one of the most powerful forces in this sector. Princess Hairi is not someone you chat with about weather and beverages." "We talked about autumn," Ji-won corrected, and she seemed to appreciate having someone treat her like a person instead of a weapon. Hyun-woo stopped pacing. "That is exactly the kind of thinking that will get you killed. Or worse, get Earth noticed by powers we are not ready to deal with." Before Ji-won could respond, a message appeared on his datapad. It was marked with the Valkyros royal seal. His supervisor went pale. The message was simple. "Princess Hairi requests your presence at the diplomatic garden at midday. Come alone." "You are not going," Hyun-woo said immediately. "It would be an insult to refuse," Ji-won replied, standing up. "Besides, if she wanted to hurt me, she would not invite me to a public garden." "You hope?" Ji-won smiled. "I hope." The diplomatic garden was a beautiful space filled with plants from dozens of worlds. Water features provided soothing sounds, and the artificial sky above showed a peaceful blue that made humans feel at home. When Ji-won arrived, he found Hairi already there, standing beside a fountain. She wore simpler clothes today, though she still had her blade at her side. "You came," she said when she noticed him. "You invited me," he replied. "It would be rude not to." She gestured to a bench. They sat, maintaining a proper distance but not the ridiculous space most beings kept from her. For a moment, neither spoke. "I need to ask you something," Hairi said finally. "Last night, you said you approached me because I looked lonely. Was that truth or strategy?" Ji-won met her eyes directly. Most beings found it hard to maintain eye contact with Hairi. Her gaze was intense, and the warrior markings made her look fierce even when she was calm. But Ji-won did not look away. "Truth," he said. "I am not clever enough for that kind of strategy." Another small smile crossed her face. "You are the first person in 2 years to speak to me without fear. Do you know why I am here at this summit?" "To represent your people." "To intimidate the other delegations," she corrected. My father, the Emperor, believes that showing strength prevents conflict. So he sends me, his daughter, the warrior princess everyone has heard stories about. I stand in rooms and people remember that the Valkros empire is powerful. That is my purpose. That sounds lonely, Jiwan said quietly. Harry looked at him with surprise. You understand? Everyone expects things from us, he said. You are supposed to be fierce and strong and untouchable. I am supposed to be careful and follow all the rules and never take risks. Sometimes the weight of expectations is heavier than armor. They talked for an hour. Harry told him about Valkros culture, about the honor codes and warrior traditions that outsiders saw as violent, but were actually about discipline and protecting others. Jiwan told her about Earth, about how humans had almost destroyed themselves before learning to look outward to the stars. Your people sound resilient, Harry said. Your people sound honorable, Jiwan replied. I wish the galaxy could see that instead of just being afraid. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the garden entrance. Ambassador Minho from the Techron Coalition stormed in with several of his staff. He was a tall being, with blue-gray skin and sharp features that suggested constant calculation. Princess Harry, he said loudly, his voice carrying across the garden. How interesting to find you here in such unexpected company. Harry stood smoothly. Her entire demeanor changed in an instant. The person who had been talking openly with Jiwan vanished, replaced by the cold warrior princess. Ambassador Minho, is there something you need? I need to address an insult, Minho said. Yesterday, your people blocked a trade route that the Techron Coalition has used for 30 years. They claim we violated some ancient Valkros honor code, but I think it is simply an excuse to bully smaller nations. The air grew tense. Other beings in the garden began moving away quietly. The route passes through Valkros territory, Harry said, her voice calm but hard as steel. You did not request permission. You simply took what you wanted. We took what was owed to us by previous agreements. Agreements that expired 5 years ago. Minho's face darkened. So the mighty Valkros hide behind technical details while choking our trade. How honorable. Jiwan saw Harry's hand move slightly toward her blade. He had seen recordings of Valkros duels. They were fast and brutal. If this escalated to a challenge, people would die. He stepped forward, placing himself between them. It was probably the stupidest thing he had ever done. Both Harry and Minho looked at him in shock. Maybe there is another way to handle this, Jiwan said quickly. Both sides have legitimate concerns. The Valkros have sovereignty over their territory. The Techron need reliable trade routes. Perhaps, instead of arguing about the past, we could discuss the future. This is not human business, Minho snapped. Maybe that is exactly why I can help, Jiwan replied. I have no stake in this dispute. I just see two groups who need something from each other, acting like enemies instead of potential partners. Minho laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. The human thinks he can solve centuries of tension with naive optimism. This is why your species is not taken seriously. Perhaps, Jiwan said calmly. But we are still here, still trying, still believing that talking is better than fighting. Is that really so foolish? Harry was watching him with an expression he could not read. Finally, she spoke. The human makes a point. Ambassador Minho, I propose we bring this dispute to formal mediation. If you are truly interested in solving the problem rather than simply making accusations. Minho looked like he wanted to refuse, but too many beings were watching now. Refusing mediation would make him look unreasonable. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. But when mediation fails, the Techron Coalition will remember how the Valkros treat their neighbors. He left with his staff following behind him. The tension slowly drained from the garden. Harry turned to Jiwan. You should not have done that. You could have been hurt. But I was not, he said. And now maybe there is a chance to solve this without anyone getting hurt. She studied him for a long moment. You are either very brave or very foolish. My mother says both. This time, Harry's laugh was louder and more genuine. I am beginning to understand why your species has survived. You do not know when to be properly afraid. Fear has its place, Jiwan said. But so does hope. Later that evening, Jiwan received another message. This one was from Hai-Ri. It requested his presence as a cultural advisor during the upcoming mediation talks. It was an unprecedented honor for a human, and it would put him directly in the center of a major diplomatic crisis. Hunwoo nearly had a breakdown when Jiwan accepted, but Jiwan could still remember the look in Hai-Ri's eyes when they talked in the garden, the loneliness behind the warrior's mask, the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. He was not going to turn away from that, even if everyone thought he was insane. The mediation talks began 3 days later in a secure conference room deep within the station. Representatives from both the Valkros Empire and the Tekron Coalition sat on opposite sides of a long table. Neutral observers from several other species lined the walls. And there, sitting beside Princess Hai-Ri as her cultural advisor, was Jiwan. The first 2 days were difficult. Ambassador Minho brought up every grievance the Tekron Coalition had accumulated over decades. The Valkros representatives responded, with cold facts about broken agreements and disrespected boundaries. Nothing moved forward. Everyone simply defended their positions. On the third day, Jiwan asked a simple question. What does each side actually need? The room went quiet. It was such a basic question that no one had thought to ask it directly. We need reliable access to the markets beyond Valkros space, Minho said finally. Our economy depends on it. We need our sovereignty respected, Hai-Ri replied, and we need assurance that our territory will not be treated as a shortcut for anyone who finds it convenient. So one side needs access and the other needs respect, Jiwan said. Those things are not opposites. They can exist together. It was a small breakthrough, but it was something. The talks continued with slightly less hostility. In the evenings, after the formal sessions ended, Jiwan and Hai-Ri would often walk through the station's observation decks. These conversations were different from the tense negotiations. They talked about everything except politics. On Valkros, we have a tradition, Hai-Ri said one evening as they watched ships come and go through the docking ports. When a warrior completes their training, they must spend 1 year traveling alone. No guards, no royal titles, just themselves and the world. Did you do that? Jiwan asked. No, I was never given the choice. The Emperor decided I was too valuable, too important as a symbol, so I went from the training grounds directly to the throne room. She paused. Sometimes I wonder who I would have become if I had taken that year. Jiwan understood that feeling. When I was young, I wanted to be an artist. I loved painting and drawing, but my family needed someone to enter diplomatic service, so that is what I did. Do you regret it? He thought about it. Sometimes. But then I remember that being here, doing this, it also has meaning. Maybe we do not get to choose everything about our lives, but we can choose how we respond to what we are given. Hai-Ri looked at him with something like admiration. You have wisdom beyond your years, Jiwan. I just pay attention, he said with a smile. Their growing friendship did not go unnoticed. Other diplomats watched with curiosity and concern. Some whispered that the human was becoming too influential with the Valkros princess. Others suggested that Hai-Ri was changing, becoming softer, and that this might be seen as weakness. Neither Jiwan nor Hai-Ri cared much about the whispers. They had found something rare in the political world: genuine understanding. On the 5th day of talks, Hai-Ri invited Jiwan to a private training room. I want to show you something, she said. A Valkros meditation technique. It helps warriors find calm before battle. The room was empty, except for practice mats and simple decorations. Hai-Ri sat cross-legged on the floor and gestured for Jiwan to do the same. She guided him through breathing exercises and visualization techniques. It was surprisingly similar to some human meditation practices, but with a focus on controlled strength rather than pure relaxation. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, Hai-Ri explained. It is to acknowledge emotion and choose how to channel it. Fear becomes awareness. Anger becomes determination. Sadness becomes empathy. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Jiwon felt his racing thoughts slow down. The constant worry about the negotiations, about making mistakes, about the weight of representing Earth, all of it became more manageable. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That helped." "My turn," Hyri said. "You mentioned human music once. I have never heard it." Jiwon pulled out his personal datapad and found a file his sister had sent him. It was a recording of a traditional Korean song, simple and beautiful. He played it for Hyri. She listened with complete attention. When the song ended, she was quiet for a long moment. "It is lovely," she said finally. "It sounds like longing, like missing something you can never return to." "That is exactly what it is about," Jiwon said, surprised. "How did you know?" "All beings understand loss," Hyri replied. "It is one of the few universal experiences." The moment felt intimate in a way that made Jiwon's heart beat faster. They were sitting close together, closer than the formal distance that diplomats usually maintained. He could see the warrior markings on her face more clearly now, the intricate patterns that told the story of her achievements. "Hyri," he began, then stopped. He had been about to say something significant, something that might change everything between them. Before he could find the words, an explosion shook the station. Alarms blared immediately. Emergency lights flashed red. Jiwon and Hyri were on their feet instantly, all the calm from their meditation vanishing. "Stay behind me," Hyri commanded, drawing her blade in one smooth motion. They moved into the corridor. Smoke filled the air. Other beings ran past, panicking and shouting. Station security was trying to direct people toward emergency shelters. "What happened?" Jiwon asked a passing guard. "Bombing in the diplomatic quarter," the guard replied. "Multiple casualties. Get to a shelter now." But Hyri was moving in the opposite direction, toward the diplomatic quarter. Jiwon followed without hesitation. They found chaos. A section of the station's outer hull had been breached, sealed now, by emergency shields but showing the damage of a powerful explosion. Several beings lay injured. Medical teams were already arriving. "This was targeted," Hyri said, examining the blast pattern with a warrior's trained eye. "Not random violence. Someone knew where the diplomatic rooms were located." A sound made them both turn. 3 figures in dark clothing emerged from the smoke, weapons drawn. They wore no identification, but their movements were professional. Trained fighters. The princess and the human. One of them said, "Perfect. 2 problems solved at once." They opened fire. Hyri moved faster than Jiwon thought possible. She deflected one energy blast with her blade, rolled forward, and disarmed the nearest attacker with a strike that broke bone. The attacker went down screaming. The other 2 spread out, trying to flank her. Jiwon grabbed a piece of debris and threw it at one attacker, disrupting their aim. It was not much, but it gave Hyri the opening she needed. What followed was brutal and efficient. Hyri fought with the precision of a master warrior. Every movement had purpose. There was no wasted energy, no hesitation. Within 30 seconds, all 3 attackers were on the ground, disarmed and neutralized. Hyri stood over them, breathing hard, her blade still in her hand. The warrior markings on her face seemed to glow in the emergency lighting. She looked fierce and terrible and magnificent. Then she turned to Jiwon. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, unable to speak for a moment. He had just watched her fight 3 trained assassins and win without breaking a sweat. "Good," she said, then did something unexpected. Her hands were shaking slightly as she sheathed her blade. "I was worried." Station security arrived moments later and took the attackers into custody. Medical teams checked both Jiwon and Hyri for injuries. They had minor cuts and bruises, but nothing serious. As the area was secured and they were being led away for formal statements, Jiwon reached out and took Hyri's hand. She looked surprised but did not pull away. "Thank you for protecting me," he said quietly. "That is what warriors do," she replied, but her hand remained in his, and she was looking at him with an expression he had not seen before. Something vulnerable and uncertain and hopeful. Around them, Other diplomats stared in shock. Not at the violence or the attempted assassination, but at the sight of the fierce Valkros princess holding hands with a human diplomat, neither of them willing to let go. The investigation moved quickly. The three attackers were professionals, but under interrogation they revealed their employer, a weapons manufacturing consortium with operations across multiple systems. They had been paid to kill both Princess Hyri and Jiwon, making it look like the Techron coalition was responsible. The goal was to start a war that would be very profitable for arms dealers, but the conspiracy went deeper. Evidence found in encrypted communications showed that members of several delegations had known about the plot. Some had even helped fund it. Ambassador Minho was not involved, but several of his staff members were. The scandal shook the entire summit. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives demanded answers. Security was increased throughout the station, and both the Valkros Empire and Earth's diplomatic corps sent urgent messages to their people. Jiwon sat in his small quarters, reading the message from his superiors for the third time. The orders were clear. He was to distance himself from Princess Hyri immediately. His involvement with her had made him a target. Earth could not afford to be drawn into conflicts between major powers. He was to return home on the next available transport. There was a knock at his door. When he opened it, Hyri stood there. She looked tired. The warrior markings on her face seemed heavier somehow. "May I come in?" she asked. He stepped aside. She entered and stood awkwardly in the center of his small room. For someone who commanded fleets and faced down enemies without fear, she looked remarkably uncertain. "I received a message from my father," she said. "He wants me to return to Valkros. He says the situation here is too dangerous and that I have compromised my position." "Compromised how?" Jiwon asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "By becoming friends with a human. By showing weakness. By allowing personal feelings to interfere with my duty." She looked directly at him. "He is not wrong. I have never acted this way before. I have always put the Empire first, always been the perfect weapon he needed." "You are not a weapon," Jiwon said firmly. "You are a person, am I? Sometimes I do not know anymore." She sat down heavily on the only chair in the room. "For my entire life I have been told what to be. The fierce princess. The warrior who makes others afraid. The symbol of Valkros power. I thought I knew who I was. Then you approached me on that balcony and treated me like a normal being. And suddenly everything became complicated." Jiwon sat on the edge of his bed, facing her. "I got similar orders. They want me to come home. They say I've gotten too involved, taken too many risks." "Then we both face the same choice," Hyri said quietly. "Duty or—" She did not finish the sentence, but Jiwon heard what she was not saying. Duty or each other. Duty or this fragile, unexpected connection they had built. The silence stretched between them. Outside the small window, stars drifted past as the station maintained its orbit. "What do you want?" Jiwon asked finally. "Not what your father wants or what the Empire needs." "What do you want, Hyri?" She looked at him with surprise, as if no one had ever asked her that question before. "I do not know." "Is that foolish? I am a princess, a warrior, a leader of my people, and I do not even know what I want for myself." "I think that makes you human," Jiwon said, then smiled. "Well, you know what I mean." A small laugh escaped her. "Yes, I know what you mean." The next day, the Galactic Council reconvened. The conspiracy had been exposed, and now there were demands for justice. Several diplomats had been arrested. The Weapons Consortium's assets were being frozen, and Princess Hyri requested permission to make a statement. The council chamber was packed. Every delegation wanted to hear what the Valkros princess would say. Some expected her to call for blood, for punishment, for a display of strength. Others worried she might use the situation to demand concessions or territory. Hyri stood at the central podium alone. Her guards waited at the chamber entrance. She wore her full ceremonial armor, every piece polished to perfection. The warrior markings on her face had been freshly applied. She looked every bit the fierce alien princess that legend spoke of. But when she began to speak, her voice was different than anyone expected. It was strong but not harsh, firm but not cruel. "For my entire life," she said, "I have been the person others feared. I stood in rooms and watched beings avoid my gaze. I fought in battles and saw enemies run rather than face me. I thought this was strength. I thought this was honor." The chamber was completely silent. But in the past weeks I have learned something important. A human diplomat approached me when no one else would. He offered me company when others offered only fear. He treated me like a person, not a weapon. And in doing so, he showed me what real strength looks like. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until she found Ji-won sitting in the Earth delegation section. Real strength, she continued, is choosing peace when violence would be easier. Real strength is seeing another being's pain and offering comfort. Real strength is standing beside someone even when it puts you in danger. These are human strengths, and they are strengths we should all learn from. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. Others looked intrigued. The conspiracy we uncovered shows how easily we can be manipulated, Hayri said. How fear and distrust can be weaponized against us. The plotters counted on us acting exactly as we always have, responding to threats with violence, choosing conflict over understanding. She turned to face the Techron Coalition section. Ambassador Mino sat there looking smaller than usual. Several of his staff members were absent, arrested for their role in the conspiracy. I apologize to the Techron Coalition, Hayri said clearly, not for defending Valkro's sovereignty, but for failing to see that your economic concerns were genuine. I was so focused on protecting territory that I did not consider working together to find solutions. Minho stood slowly. For a moment, no one knew what he would do. Then he bowed, a gesture of respect. I apologize as well, Princess. I let pride and frustration push me toward hostility, when cooperation would have served my people better. The chamber erupted in surprised conversation. An apology between the Valkros and Techron Coalition was unprecedented. Hayri raised her hand for silence. I have a proposal. The Valkros Empire will establish an ambassador position, specifically for cultural exchange with younger species. This ambassador will work to help others understand us as more than warriors, and help us understand others as more than potential threats. She paused, and a small smile crossed her face. I volunteer for this position. I believe I have found a teacher who can help me understand what true strength means. Every eye in the chamber turned to Ji-won. He felt his face grow hot with embarrassment and pride. After the session ended, Ji-won found Hayri in a private corridor. That was incredible, he said. You changed everything in there. I only told the truth, she replied. You taught me to see it. What about your father? The orders to return home? Hayri's expression became more serious. He gave me an ultimatum. Return and accept an arranged marriage to strengthen political alliances, or choose this new path and face potential exile. She looked at Ji-won with those fierce red eyes. I told him I choose the path where I can be myself. And what did he say? I will find out tomorrow. He is coming here to deliver his response in person. Ji-won felt his heart sink. The Emperor of the Valkros Empire was coming. This could go very badly. Whatever happens, he said, taking her hand again, you made the right choice. Being yourself is always the right choice. I hope you are right, Hayri said quietly. Because if you are wrong, I may have just lost everything. They stood together in the corridor, hands clasped, while the station continued its endless orbit through the stars. The Emperor's ship arrived at dawn station time. It was a massive vessel, black and silver with the Valkros royal crest displayed prominently. The entire diplomatic community was on edge. When the Emperor of the Valkros Empire traveled personally, it usually meant something significant was about to happen. Ji-won could not sleep the night before. He kept thinking about Hayri and the choice she had made. She had risked everything because he had shown her kindness on a balcony. The weight of that responsibility felt crushing. Around midnight, there was a quiet knock on his door. When he opened it, Hayri stood there in simple clothes without her armor or ceremonial dress. I could not sleep either, she said. May I come in? They ended up on the small balcony attached to his quarters, looking out at the stars. It reminded Ji-won of that first meeting which felt like years ago instead of just weeks. Tell me honestly, Hayri said. Do you think I made the right choice? I think you made the brave choice, Ji-won replied. Whether it was right or wrong, only time will tell. But choosing to live as yourself instead of as what others expect? That takes courage. I am afraid, she admitted. I have faced enemies in battle without fear. I have led fleets through dangerous territory without hesitation. But the thought of disappointing my father, of losing my place in the empire, it terrifies me. Ji-won understood. When I decided to become a diplomat instead of an artist, my father was disappointed. For years, I worried I had made the wrong choice. But eventually, I realized something important. We cannot live our entire lives trying to make others proud. At some point, we have to make ourselves proud. They talked through the night. Hae-ri told him about her childhood, about a mother who died when she was young and a father who channeled his grief into making his daughter strong. Ji-won told her about growing up in a family where duty always came before dreams, and how he had learned to find purpose in service. As false dawn began to lighten the artificial sky outside, Hae-ri asked, "What will you do? Will you return to Earth?" "I do not know," Ji-won said honestly. "Part of me thinks I should. I have caused trouble for my people by getting involved in things bigger than myself. But another part of me thinks that trouble is sometimes necessary, that playing it safe means missing out on the things that really matter." Hae-ri looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You have changed my life, Ji-won. In just a few weeks, you showed me possibilities I never imagined. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that." "You changed mine too," he said quietly. The Emperor's arrival ceremony was formal and impressive. He walked into the main diplomatic hall surrounded by honor guards, his presence commanding attention from every being in the room. He was tall and powerfully built, with the same red eyes as his daughter but more battle scars and gray in his hair. Princess Hae-ri stood waiting for him, wearing her full ceremonial armor. She bowed deeply, the respectful greeting of a daughter to her father. "Hae-ri," the Emperor said, his voice carrying across the hall. "You have made quite a stir." "Yes, father. You defied my direct order to return home. You proposed a new role that does not exist. You publicly associated yourself with a human diplomat of no particular rank or importance." He paused. "You have behaved in ways I never expected from you." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Ji-won watched from the Earth delegation section, his hands clenched. Then the Emperor did something no one anticipated. He laughed. It was a deep, genuine sound that filled the hall with surprise. "You remind me of myself when I was young," he said to Hae-ri. "Stubborn, idealistic, convinced that the old ways needed changing." He gestured for her to stand. "When I sent you to this summit, I hoped you might find your own path. I was once a warrior who felt trapped by duty. I did not want the same for my daughter, but I did not know how to tell you that. So I sent you here and hoped." Hae-ri looked stunned. "You wanted this?" "I wanted you to choose," the Emperor corrected. "Whether you chose duty or something else, I wanted it to be your choice. A ruler who has no will of their own is just a puppet." He looked around the hall. "Though I admit, I did not expect you to choose quite so dramatically." He turned his attention to the assembled delegates. "My daughter has proposed serving as a cultural exchange ambassador. I approve this proposal. The Valkyros Empire has been feared for too long. Perhaps it is time we were understood instead." Relief washed through Ji-won like a wave. Hae-ri was not going to be punished or exiled. She had her father's blessing. But the Emperor was not finished. However, this new position requires a counterpart. Someone from another species who can provide perspective and help bridge the gap between our people and others. His eyes fixed on Ji-won. "Human Ji-won, step forward." Ji-won felt every eye in the hall turn to him. His supervisor, Director Hyun-woo, looked like he was going to faint. But Ji-won stood and walked forward, trying not to shake. "You approached my daughter when no one else would," the Emperor said. "You showed courage without arrogance, kindness without weakness. These are rare qualities. Would you be willing to serve as the human liaison to our cultural exchange program?" It was a huge honor. It was also a huge responsibility. Ji-won would be representing humanity in direct partnership with one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. "Yes, Your Majesty," Ji-won said. "I would be honored." The Emperor nodded. "Good. Then it is settled." The following weeks were busy with arrangements. The mediation talks between Valkyros and Tekron concluded successfully with new trade agreements that satisfied both sides. The conspirators were prosecuted, New security measures were implemented throughout the station, and Jiwon prepared for his new role. Earth's government was initially hesitant, but ultimately agreed. Having a human in such a position could open doors for humanity throughout the galaxy. On the last day before Hairi and Jiwon were scheduled to depart for their first joint mission, they met one final time on the balcony where everything had begun. "Are you ready?" Hairi asked. "No," Jiwon admitted. "But I think that is okay. The best things in life usually start with being not ready." She smiled. It was easier for her to smile now. The fierce warrior princess was still there, but she was no longer the only thing people saw. Now they saw Hairi, a person who contained both strength and gentleness, both duty and dreams. "I never thanked you properly," she said, "for approaching me that first night, for seeing me as more than a weapon." "You do not need to thank me for basic kindness," Jiwon replied. "Perhaps that is the problem. Basic kindness has become so rare that we treat it as exceptional." She reached out and took his hand. It had become a natural gesture between them, this simple connection. "I want to change that. I want the galaxy to see that strength and kindness are not opposites." "That sounds like a good mission," Jiwon said. Below them, the docking bay was busy with ships coming and going. Their transport was being prepared. Soon they would leave this station and begin their work. There would be challenges ahead. Not everyone was happy about the partnership between Valkyros and humanity. Some would resist change, others would test them. But standing there on the balcony, hands clasped, watching the stars, both Jiwon and Hairi felt ready. Not because they had all the answers, but because they had found something rare and valuable. Genuine friendship based on seeing each other as complete individuals. "Ready to go?" A voice called from below. It was one of the transport crew. Hairi looked at Jiwon. "Ready for the next adventure?" He squeezed her hand. "With you?" "Always." They walked down together toward the docking bay. Other diplomats who had once avoided Hairi now greeted her warmly. They asked questions about the cultural exchange program. Some even admitted they had been wrong to judge her by her reputation alone. The change was not complete. Old habits and fears would not disappear overnight. But it was a beginning. As their transport lifted off from the station, Jiwon looked back at the massive structure floating in space. So much had happened there in such a short time. He had arrived as a minor diplomat hoping not to make mistakes. He was leaving as a liaison to one of the galaxy's great powers, tasked with building bridges between species. "What are you thinking?" Hairi asked. "That my mother was right," Jiwon said. "I am too curious for my own good. But maybe that is not such a bad thing." "Your curiosity changed my life," Hairi said. "Changed both our lives. I would say that is a very good thing." The transport accelerated, carrying them toward their first assignment together. There would be difficult moments ahead, cultural misunderstandings, political complications, beings who resisted the changes they represented. But they would face those challenges together, drawing strength from their unexpected friendship. And across the galaxy, a new story was beginning to spread. The story of a fierce alien princess and the human who dared approach her. The story of how one simple act of kindness on a balcony had changed the course of diplomatic relations between species. The story of how seeing others as they truly are, rather than as we fear them to be, can transform everything. It was a very human story. And that perhaps was the point. Humans had come to the stars without the military might of the Valkyros, without the economic power of the Techron, without the ancient wisdom of elder species. They had come with curiosity, empathy, and the stubborn belief that connection was possible even across vast